It was like retirement.
Oh, really?
We're all up there having a good old time, and then like all these other people.
Where the territories have been
Okay.
formed, and to get to that point, and it's, they're just sort of an arrangement, but no contract.
Oh yeah, that's from going.
Bill's trying to meet with Robert's brother-in-law, he's the chief.
Okay, I'm Greg here.
Yeah,
and I've got.
Yeah, nice to meet
I figured
you.
so.
For the next time.
Here, yeah.
You can sit right here.
Hey,
Don't have. I can't believe you're
Oh, okay.
I don't want to cry.
Kind of know, they knew something down there, but yeah, I don't
We'll break the ice and turn it over to
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Bellamy. I've been hired as kind of special outside counsel to help you through the possible territory adoption process. Just by way of background, I've been in private practice for 20 years. I've been the general counsel for the Indiana Township Association for the last 5 years. If you told me I formed a dozen territories, I'd say okay. And if you told me I formed 20 territories, I'd say okay. I kind of stopped counting. Greg Veritas is with me. He is with FSG. That's another organization, but he is your financial advisor on this. And whether we mean to or not, we have kind of developed a method to navigate units of government through the territory formation process, and that's a statutory process in Indiana that you have to go through if you want to do a combination for providing fire and EMS in combined jurisdictions. And so we have to, as a matter of law, have 3 public hearings and then a public meeting. To me, those are 2 different things. Sometimes people will say, well, a meeting and hearing back and forth. Tonight is the first of 3 public hearings, and that is where Greg, Chief, and I will put on some information, and we will share that information with the council and the township board to consider, and we will do that same presentation 3 times. So if you came tonight, and you're going to come to the second session and go, I want to hear the rest of the story. Well, there's no rest of the story. It's just a rerun of the same story. We will present the same financial information. So if you're from the public and you came to learn about this, you can send in a question, you can contact Chief, you can contact me, contact the trustee, whomever, but the same financial information, the same legal information, and the same capital and personnel information all 3 times. All 3 sessions will be here. They'll all be at 6. Our next session will be Monday, February 20th. Our 3rd public hearing will be Monday, March 5th. And then they'll vote on Friday, March 20th. That is a public meeting. The public is welcome to watch, but we won't take testimony and questions, and we won't do the presentation again. The 2 units, the township and the town, will be together, and they will each have to make a motion and adopt that motion to join the territory, to join the interlocal agreement. And if they both agree to do it, it doesn't have to be unanimous. It has to be a majority of each board to adopt basically the personnel plan and the tax and levy plan that's being presented. Then my work kind of starts. I accumulate all the information we have, and I go see the DLGF. That's the Indiana Department of Local Government Finance, and they decide if we did it right. So we go through this whole process. I submit all of this in April, and then anytime I get an email from the end of May through typically the middle of July from the DLGF, I tense up to find out whether or not they like what we did or whether or not they thought I used a semicolon when I should have used a period or something like that. And sometimes it does seem that fickle, but we have to make sure we hit all these steps. And you may ask, why is Jeff presenting this, or why is Chief presenting that, or why is Greg presenting this other information? Because we have to. The statute requires that certain information, particularly the fiscal projection, has to be presented. So I need to determine on the town, do we have at least 3 of the 5 town councilors here?
Yeah.
Okay. And for the township, do we have at least 2 of the 3 board members here?
Yeah.
So we have a quorum of both. We can call a joint meeting to order. Just as an introduction, what is a fire territory, if you haven't dealt with it before, the code, Indiana code, permits existing units of government to enter into a contract. That's all this is. We're not forming a new unit of government. We aren't merging the town and the township. They will both have their own separate budgets. They will both continue to operate on their areas of control, but we'll collaborate on fire and EMS together, and we'll collaborate with the department to do that. This is not a fire district. When I first started doing this, the word district and territory would kind of pop out of my mouth, meaning the same thing. They don't mean the same thing. The fire district is its own thing. The commissioners pass it, or the freeholders of the county turn in a petition to the commissioners and say, we want to be a district. Don't worry about that. We're not being a district. We're not pursuing a district. We're not recommending a district. What a territory is the 2 units make a contract, and they can collaborate to provide any municipal or public service that they're capable of providing on their own together. And what this does is this allows your council and your board to still have a degree of local control and input from constituents, and input through election and things like that. So what we would really be looking at is what does the territory do? Really, the big ticket thing your territory is going to be doing is overseeing the contract with the volunteer department. And entities where they have a full-time pay department, and that can happen eventually, that can happen sometime in the future, you're laying a foundation if that's needed, then there'll be greater oversight because you've got W-2 employees. In this instance, they will be advising, they will be helping administer that contract. They'll also be involved when the department says, hey, I think we need to buy some apparatus, hey, maybe we need to think about upgrading the station or looking at another station. They'll be involved on all those issues. They can't issue debt on their own. The town council and the township board and stuff will work together on issuing debt. And typically folks would appoint or recommend, I'm going to have this township board member, this counselor be on the board, and let's find a third person, to serve on that board together so we've got an odd number, we don't get deadlocked. And then you go back to your township board meeting, to your council meeting. Mostly like a council, you'll have a person sit on zoning appeals, you have a person sit on public works and whatever, and they'll come back and say, here's what's going on at the water plant, here's what's going on at the BZA or planning commission, here's what's going on at the fire territory. And they inform the rest of the members of that group as to what's going on. Our meeting direction tonight, we're going to have 2 presentations. One presentation is from Chief Chapman. He's going to put on the kind of the capital and personnel. What's going on with the fire department? What's the need? What kind of runs are we having? What kind of public demand is there for fire service? What kind of material, personnel, and services? And then the other presentation is from Greg Eritas. He's one of the principals at Financial Services Group. He is our CPA, and he is going to go through, he's done a fiscal analysis. We have to do a 3-year look forward, a 3-year estimation based on the assessed valuation, the proposed budget, and what the impact is going to be on tax bottom line. So we'll do questions at the end. We'll stay as long as we need or as short as we need for whatever questions there are. But we'll go through with Chief's presentation, then we'll go through Greg's presentation.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Fire Chief Clinton Chapman, and we have a PowerPoint. I'm going to dim the lights a little so we can see this a little bit better. So we've called the meeting to order. You guys have met Jeff Bellamy, you've met Greg. We're going to dive on into our PowerPoint here. So, Morgantown Fire Protection Territory, serving the communities of the town of Morgantown and Jackson Township of Morgan County. Again, we have our dates here of our 3 public meetings, and then the day that they vote on March 20th. So why a fire territory? So with Morgantown Fire Department, we are continuing to see increasing call volumes. We are also seeing increasing cost of equipment, apparatus, and overall running expenses. With this, we want to increase the levy to support long-term operations of the department. We want to add some paid part-time and on-call staff while also utilizing our current volunteer system that we have in place. With that, we will see lower ISO ratings, which that affects your property insurance premiums if we can move forward with this territory. And with this territory, it would decrease response times to better serve the community because we would have people here part-time being paid. So I know this chart's a little hard to see, but right here, 2015, we were about 175 calls. In 2016, we're about 150. Again, 2017, 18, all the way up to now, we're doing almost 400 calls a year. 2023, we had right at almost 400 calls. And the way we're projecting already with this month of January into February, we're continuing to have call volume. So we are busier than we've ever been. Increasing cost of equipment, apparatus, and overall running expenses. So another reason for the territory is because costs have increased on an average of 30 to 40% in the last 5 years with, and here's some examples. A fire engine cost $600,000 in 2020. Today, that same fire engine would cost us $900,000. Firefighter turnout gear in 2020 costed $2,500. If we wanted to order gear today, the best price we've been able to find here of late is $3,700 for a set of fire gear. That fire gear has to be replaced every 10 years. And if we have someone that we like to have 2 sets of gear if possible, and they'd be 5 years apart. So it's a rotation. So they have some backup gear and new gear for safety reasons. Our air packs that we wear in 2020 costed $6,000. Today they cost $8,000. Other equipment is up on average of 30% from 2020. Other increased cost of running the fire department includes just fuel, utilities, and building repairs. All that, we all have that in some of our personal lives where the cost of having things repaired, roof, anything on the building, is costing more than it's ever costed us. Our goals for adding personnel and equipment and a new station. So our goal with the territory is we can add 3 paid personnel on station 24/7. And again, we're going to continue to utilize our volunteers to maximize response time and to have enough personnel at emergency scenes. So we're still going to have volunteers, have part-time paid, that way we can better serve the community. We're going to pay the volunteers an amount per run to help offset the cost of their fuel, and they're going to come in and do training and stuff. And we want to show them that we still want them involved, and this is one way to show them is pay them per run that they make if they volunteer their time to come in and help with that run. We're going to work to decrease the township and town ISO rating to save on property insurance premiums. And one way we can do that, to be honest, we saw it in 2015 when we had the ambulance here and we had some part-time paid. They acknowledged that, and the ISO rating was better. We got the ambulance was taken over by the county, 2017, and you guys noticed then that we had to go back to volunteer status. Not having someone here partially paid at all changed your ISO rating very quickly. And with having some paid staffing here, active training logs that we are doing now, and continuing to do, that'll help your ISO rating. From the fire department side of the ISO rating, there's other things besides the fire department in an ISO rating. So we're going to replace old and outdated apparatus and equipment. Our goal is to also, with this territory, build a new centralized fire station. And we're going to provide continued education and training and help promote young people in our community to be involved with the fire department. Training is not always cheap. Education's not cheap, and again, we want to continue to be the best we can be for the younger generation to see us, desire to be a part of this, and get them trained up so they can continue to grow and be a part of this community. So our economic study of tax savings by the Indiana Volunteer Fire Association. In 2020, a study done by the American Economics Group Incorporated for the Indiana Volunteer Firefighters Association shows that if the local government or state had to take over providing fire protection, the tax levy for Jackson Township, Morton County, including the town of Morgantown, so the township and town, the taxes would increase by 146.94%. Our goal is to minimize that type of tax levy by creating this fire protection territory. This is a picture of the Indiana Volunteer Firefighter Association pamphlet that company put together, and in it had Jackson Township and was showing that 146.94% increase. So some potential property insurance savings examples. So a current cost of a home that is insured at $250,000 with an ISO rating of 10, which is where we're at right now. Cincinnati Insurance Company, $1,606. Indiana Farmers, $2,122. Auto owners, $2,147. The potential savings of a home insured for $250,000 with an ISO rating of 7, you can see here Cincinnati Insurance, if we're ISO rating of 7, it's now $1,349. Indiana Farmers, $1,635. Auto owners, $1,658. So you can see there is a significant amount of savings when we get the ISO rating down. So our planned staffing for the territory, like we said, we want to have 3 part-time employees on station 24/7. Figuring that up, that's that's $527,600 to do that for 365 days. The fire chief would get a salary of $5,200 just to be the chief and help scheduling, stuff like that, on top of it. The chief is able to sign up for shifts. Same with the assistant chief, there's a $2,600 salary there because of the stuff they have to do, like helping schedule employees to work, things like that. They'll be doing all the computer stuff. The volunteers, we've got $18,000 set aside to pay, where we talked about paying per run. We've got $18,000 set aside for that. And the employee benefits and taxes that it would cost for us to do this, $38,500. Some other services and costs, so our utilities and communications is $23,600. Our gear, we've got $35,000 there so we can get the right amount of gear to get started and continue to work and replace and grow that. Our training, $10,000 for training. Insurance for the department, $35,000. Fuel, $10,000. Small equipment, $20,000. Repair and maintenance budget of $28,000. So our capital improvement plan is we're going to replace gear at 10 years of age as per OSHA and NFPA standards. So as fire department, we have to follow NFPA standards and OSHA, and their recommendation is every 10 years you have to get rid of that gear and replace it. Test and replace air packs per OSHA and NFPA standards. So every 5 years we have to flow test our bottles, pressure test them. We have to have a company come in and do that, put a stamp on them for 5 years. After 15 years of life, that bottle is no longer good. We have to replace the bottle and or the whole pack. And again, like we said earlier, $8,000 per pack right now. What's it going to be in 5 years, 15 years? So our goal is to consider buying a mini pumper to replace engine 162 that's currently out there. Buy a pumper tanker to replace tanker 161. So with NFPA standards, it is a recommendation that we replace fire trucks If it's an engine pumper, it's every 10 or 20. Engine pumper is 20 years. Tanker, I believe, is very similar. It's either 15 or 20 years. They want you to replace the fire truck. A lot of our trucks are at that life now, if not exceeded that life. Again, we want to buy property for a new building that's centrally located in our town and township area, response area. We want to build a new centralized station to help lower the ISO rating throughout Jackson Township and the town of Morgantown. A new building will need additional funding not included in the current budget. This is usually done with a grant or a bond. So that is our part of our capital improvement plan. Continuing our capital improvement plan. Our capital improvement plans are ever changing. This can happen year to year due to the need of the department from the assessments and evaluations. We encourage our community to attend events at the station to stay informed on where we're at, where we're going, what we need, things like that. So now we have financial tax impact. So Greg, I'm sorry, how do I say that?
The best thing is call me Greg.
We're going to say Greg. So Greg from Financial Services Group Corporation, he is going to get up and talk. I'm going to turn the lights back on. I'm going to let Greg, sorry, that was quick, abrupt, sorry. But Greg is going to explain this packet that has been passed around, and we're going to go on from there.
Thank you, and good evening. Hopefully everybody's got a copy, because we've got extra copies here. So, and the fire department will have them on hand, so if nobody does, because rather than project it, we want to go through it. So I'm starting on page 1, and Exhibit A, and, you know, I'm fine with, if you don't understand something, raise your hand, let me know, and you know, we'll explain, I'll try and explain it again. The key tonight is, like Jeff said, we'll do this 3 times so that people throughout the community have time to come to these, in case today's a bad day. And then they can come to the next meeting or whatever. On page 1, this is the full amount of the budget. And Chief, you did a really good job on your presentation. Very concise and very good. And so, good job. And so, what the chief and everybody came up with is the estimated budget of $821,000. I will tell you that, given our experience, this is a reasonable budget. It may sound a little higher to you, but given the tax effect and the tax impact, we kind of think, you know, I've been doing this for quite a while. It is a very reasonable budget. It will not do things like give you a paid staff overnight and things like that, as the chief explained. But this is what's called the operating budget. Now, what we do with the operating budget of $821,750 is we start looking at the tax impact. Page 2, we're talking about the 2 entities, Jackson and the town of Morgantown. They're going together, and what we'll do is charge that budget over the entire assessed valuation of $315 million. It's a smaller assessed valuation, but it's also, it added up pretty quick between the 2 entities. So let's at 315, in my opinion, is a good starting point again. So you can see that the assessed valuation, as the runs have grown, so has the value of property and what's going on in the area. The next page, page 3, we have to, and all of these are required by DLGF, and we follow the same format that's been approved, and all of these documents are kind of required. So we have to show what's currently being charged. And quite frankly, in Jackson Township, only 2 pennies is being charged to support the fire department at this point in time. The town of Morgantown, it is our understanding, does not use a property tax rate, But if you look at the note number 2, that basically using public safety lit to fund fire protection. Now, point there is the town could contribute that if it wants going forward also, or in some of the capital improvements have grown so expensive, there may be a need for that, but the town could also use that maybe for police protection or something like that. Remember, public safety lit has to stay within the public safety realm. So, but that's up to the town. Exhibit D is the most critical schedule really going forward. Why do I say that? Well, I say that because the bottom line estimated 31 pennies to run the fire territory is down at the very bottom of the 25 column. Keep in mind, we can't do anything for 24. We approve it in 24, and the state approves it in 24, and then we would set up the budget through the providing unit for 2025. The assumption would be that both the township and the town would contribute some starting capital, their balances. Matter of fact, the township will not be able to levy their 2 cents going forward in 25 because you can't have double taxation if this is approved and if this vehicle is used. So, if you look at the 2025 column, the very first number is the estimated budget. Since this will be a brand new taxing district and will be basically paying some bills January, February, March, and you won't get the income from property taxes until May and December, or June and December, the state allows us to build in a cash reserve to basically start. Notice that cash reserve is not in 26 and 27. So you build it up, you get the opportunity one time to do that, and then that's it. The state then, again, looks at this very carefully and looks at all the numbers, and it is subject to their approval. Miscellaneous revenues, if you look down there at the number 2, that's things like auto excise and FIT and CVET, and a lot of times they get that, well, wait a minute, if you're including auto excise in there, does that mean my license plates are going up? No. It's the amount that's being allocated to the county as a whole. Some of that will be allocated here. So this isn't raising the license fee. So, if you come down, you'll see the total budget for 2025 is $879, and then it goes down, and it goes down because we eliminate the cash reserve. So the operating fund is 27, almost 28 pennies. That's what it's going to cost, and then 24 or 25 pennies and 26 pennies. So that is the operating fund. Now, a fire territory gets the right to create free funds if it deems it appropriate. Notice the second fund, Fire Territory Debt Service Fund. This entity is not proposing to issue any debt at this point in time and has not approved that, so the state will not approve a debt service fund tax rate. If down the road you want to build your new building and things like that, the 2 entities would go in and would pass a bond resolution, maybe get a full grant, that'd be nice, and not have to do a debt. And that is possible, and we've seen it. And so, but this is the second fund that I want to make you aware of that can be utilized by the fire territory going forward. The third fund is the one where we called the Proposed Fire Territory Equipment Replacement Fund. This is the equipment replacement fund that your chief was talking about would supply, and you really don't have right now, but would supply on a going forward basis approximately $113,000. Now I can tell you that 9 out of 10 times it's not enough. okay? But, so why didn't we raise it further? We can't. If you look at the second to the bottom line, the 3.33 pennies is the state law limit for the fire equipment replacement fund. So, once you're there, and once you use the 333 pennies, it stays there as long as you use it. And that is what we commonly always use in all of these, because the cost of equipment is enormous. There's no doubt about it. Even used. And I've worked with several people that have tried to get it used. So, if it's even available. So the bottom line is 31.23 pennies, 28.29 pennies, and 29.10 pennies. And again, it's fluctuating because of the cash reserve, and then we modify, put in a little, the cost of living up in the estimated budget. Now, what will that do to your taxes? There will be an increase in the taxes if we go forward. It's obvious that that will happen, and I'm on page 5. But what you see in Jackson Township is that you see we have a current rate of $1.38. That is actually a very reasonable rate. And so some might think it is high, but I'm going with comparison of numbers throughout the state of Indiana. Even the Morgantown rate of 2.05 is pretty reasonable. What you see then is in the Jackson column, we eliminate the 2.18 pennies because you can't have double taxation, so that would go away. And then we increase it with 31.23 pennies, meaning the estimated tax rate overall is 1.67. Now this is where I usually get the question, well, wait a minute, what happens when, that's your estimate, what happens when it comes in at 180? Well, the state will not allow that. You're setting the maximums here, and so you cannot go over 1.67 pennies, or the total rate of, actually the rate for the fire territory of 31 pennies. So what we propose to you, or show you, I'm a CPA, so I have to keep my license. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is truly the limits that are being established here. And so that's what we're required to do. And we state it for 3 years, and they keep a close eye on it for the 3 years. After that, it only grows like the town of Morgantown and the township. It only grows by the growth quotient, which is currently 4%. So you are locked. It's one bite of the apple. And then you're locked by the growth quotient that all the other entities in the state of Indiana, cities, towns, townships are locked by, which is the growth quotient. But as you can see, there is a 21 and 15% increase in the overall Morgantown bill. Number 2, year 2, since there is a slight reduction, it goes down, and then in year 3, slight increase. And again, that was the inflationary factor that was built into the budget. If you have the same growth that you've experienced in the past, those increases, the decrease will probably be greater, and the increase won't be that. Because if you have 7% increase in AV, but again, we're not allowed to really kind of project and say what, show you, hey, if we have 10% growth in AV, we'd have a rate capped at that. That's not the rules of law that we're required to follow. So, now page 8, it's a little bit more complicated. We're going to bring in something called circuit rate. As you know, the state legislature, and then it was put in the Constitution, what's called the tax caps of 1, 2, and 3. Those tax caps mean, for instance, and I'll show you another page here, but if you had a $100,000 assessed value home, you would not pay, no matter what, more than $1,000. Now, what we have here is we have very low tax rates. So as you can see, in Jackson Township, it would take about a $3.8 million home to hit the circuit breaker. That's not happening. And in Morgantown, it would be at 200,000. So the residential rental and agriculture and all other, which is all other is commercial, they will have the full increase, and you're going to see that here in a minute. Okay, what did we do on page 9? And I tested this today just to make sure it worked. You can go online to this website, assuming that you know your assessed valuation of your home. Then you can go in and recalculate. The tax rates are in there for 24. You can recalculate your bill as it stands right now, and then you can also see what makes up your bill and if you're at the tax cap or not. The reason we give you this information is in the next couple of pages, we take a typical bill, or levels of bills, but I can guarantee if there's 25 people in here, we got 25 different assessed values. So, I wouldn't have any knowledge of what your AV is. So what we've done now is we're required by the state to put together 3 appendixes. Appendix A, B, and C. What is the difference? It is basically going to be the difference in the properties. So let's go to page A1. Page A1, if you look at the top, it's Jackson Residential Homestead Property Tax Impact. As you can see, in Jackson, we said that property tax was so low that what you will do, you will see the full increase. And so if you have a $200,000 home, that's basically a $23 or about $24 increase a month. Okay? And this is assuming you have owner-occupied of up to 1 acre of land. A lot of people, it was kind of funny, I was with some of the state reps, and they're going to, a lot of people have maybe an acre, remember that's a house and an acre considered a homestead, and they have like 10 other acres. Well, what everybody is doing is taking out alfalfa seed and basically spreading it out on the other 9 acres, and now they're calling it farmland. So it's $1,200, so there's a little way that you can lower your tax bill. It's about $1,200 per acre is the value that they use. So if you're not using that, then, you again would have to look up your own assessed valuation. The next one is Morgantown residential. So again, we use each of these, one for Morgantown, one for Jackson, and I'm used to 3 townships sometimes, and so we only have 2 here, A1 or A4 and A5. So here is the estimated Morgantown residential, and as you can see, once we get up to 200,000, those bills are not going up. Now, how do we fund this? It's basically sharing with the other taxing districts because of the creating of this. So actually, if you've got a high-value home in Morgantown, you're not going to pay, you're not going to have an increase in your bill. So, let's go look at the other properties. So Appendix B now is Jackson farmland and non-homestead residential. I have a farm down in Knox County. It's a family farm we've owned since the 30s. So I'm always kind of concerned here. And so you can see in Jackson farmland, again, you've got a pretty reasonable tax rate in Jackson, but you will see that same increase. And depending on the AV of the farmland or the non-homestead residential. So that's an example of that is if you owned your house and you had 3 or 4 other houses in Morgantown and you were renting those out, that would be the non-homestead residential. So let's go there for Morgantown. That one, basically, there isn't an impact because now we're over 2%. Okay? And so now that the rate is, once we put in the fire territory and it becomes over 2%, there is no impact because of that. The Jackson then on C1, This is commercial property, so commercial property, again, being 3%, and none of our rates are at $3. So at that point, each of those, as you can see in Jackson, if it was a $250,000 commercial building, it would go up $60 per month. And then on the next one, Morgantown, you would see about $65. Again, the percent is different because the tax rate is higher. The rest of these pages are really not that important to the average taxpayer. D1 is the allocation of the lit distribution, meaning we are required to show Jackson Township and Morgantown that technically from a lit standpoint, they will be held harmless, except Jackson Township will incur $55,000 less in lit because it will not have that $2 or that additional property tax. Okay? But I want to show you on the next page, it does kind of make itself up through the reallocation on D2. Now, why am I talking about the lit? This is only the portion that's given to the township and given to the town. And so what happens here, your lit rate isn't going up. Please don't confuse that. We don't have the right to raise. The county has to do that. The fire territory doesn't have the right to raise lit, and lit is, by the way, local income tax. Okay? So we can't raise local income tax. But as you can see, Jackson Township will get a bump once it's reallocated, and so will Morgantown. And basically, this shows you that there's a reallocation from all the other entities in the district. Same thing we're required to show on D3 with lit public safety. Again, lit public safety is not going up. Morgantown will still, and the township doesn't even get it. The Morgantown civil town will still get it, relatively close to what it was before. Same way D4 on economic development. And so, estimated excise tax, I won't bore you with those pages, but again, those are entity driven. And it's something that the town board and the township board, they want to look at. You want to look at these pages. But the overall goal of the state of Indiana from lit is not to harm you by doing this, because otherwise it would be a negative, right, of doing it. And it's not trying to raise the income tax rate in the town or the township, because that would work either, and you don't have that right. So it's basically boils down to those pages that I showed you early on in the property taxation. So at this point in time, I'll take a pause, and any question, I know, as the CPA, sometimes these numbers come like a swamp, but if there's a question I can help you with. Our goal here is to help you all decide and make the right decision. And so that's what we're here for. Questions about the numbers? If not, Chief, we'll turn it back to you, Sean.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
And I feel like I'm missing something really basic, so.
What page you on?
I'm not on the page yet. I might embarrass myself. But in looking at, way out, A1, the one of the pages that show the effects on various properties that assume their estimated gross assessed value. So if you look at, starting with A2, I guess, for the town. I'm most interested in this for the town, right?
Right.
A5 would be the owner occupied up to 1 acre of land. We're showing on owner occupied residential property and non-homestead residential, that there's not an effect, right? I mean, because of the circuit breakers, because of the tax cap, if those properties are already maxed out, right?
Right.
We can't collect any more property tax on those properties.
That's correct.
So then where's the money coming from?
So for the total levy,
Mhm.
okay, if you can't get it from the consumer, then what happens is all of these other taxing districts that I've laid out there, they would get a little less of the pie and you would get your part of the pie.
The
So-
taxing districts.
Yes, so let's go to like D2.
Okay.
Those are all the different taxing districts. So it would only get the portion of the total budget that would be allocated to the, and I don't know how many $300,000 homes there are here. But that portion, okay, would be reallocated among them to be able to fund the budget. You'd still get the budget amount, but basically it's a reallocation of those higher,
So that additional cost, when we look at funding the budget for the Morgantown Volunteer Department, after the territory's formed, the burden of that's going to be carried by those properties that aren't at the cap now.
it'll be carried by the 2%, some of the 2% will be carried by the 3%.
Right.
And some of the lower 1%, and then the remainder will be made up by reallocation.
Okay, and got that. The reallocation then, I need to understand that a little bit better. You're back on D2, you said.
Yeah, because that's all the people that have a tax rate.
The people in the county.
Yes, sir.
And so when we look at local income tax,
Yeah, I was,
selected by the county.
yeah, I was just keeping these as the entities,
Yeah.
or as opposed to the income tax sheet. So these are all that have tax rates in the county,
Mhm.
and so Morgan County would have a little bit more circuit breaker. Okay, by the proportion of I'm getting very technical here, but
Right.
by the proportion of the budget that's not carried or paid for by the higher tax cap people.
Okay,
Okay?
right, but that portion that isn't carried by the 2 and 3% people, right? Or that portion of the 1% folks, right?
Yeah,
We look at the local income certified share spread across the various districts in Morgan County. And are you saying that as a result of this formation of the territory, the reallocation of that will result in Morgantown and Jackson Township getting more than what they would have before?
in income taxes, yes.
Yes, in income tax.
Because they remember, they're creating the territory is creating a new levy.
Yeah,
Okay, and what the state does is reproportion based upon, it's a formula that they do, and they reproportion the income tax.
okay.
So, yes.
So let me see if I can carry this out. So then, the income tax collected by the county,
Assuming it doesn't change in total.
okay, reapportion, right, will pay a significant part of the proposed budget for the department in this new territory.
We haven't assumed that these additional revenues will go to the fire territory, because that's up to the entity of Morgantown and of the township. So we don't make the assumption that it'll drive down the tax rate.
And one of the things too that I don't realize, and Greg's the same, lit is impermanent.
Mhm.
Lit, you'll be kind of all puffed up on lit. You're probably a net exporter of lit right now. You probably send out more lit to the suburbs and the bigger municipals now. Now you're going to reset this levy, and an unintended benefit is you're going to start bringing lit home.
Okay.
But Mooresville and Brown get together, and they make a territory. Or one of the school districts does a referendum or a big bond, and all of a sudden, they get their turn at rewriting this. Or, and I don't think this is not been talked about, Morgan County does some sort of county-wide district of some form. And they start rewriting this formula, and you start drifting down in lit.
Yeah. Okay.
So it can drift the other way.
It can go up and down. For now, I don't advise, and I don't think Greg advises either, to fund operations off of lit, or blow yourself up, living beyond your means up to the lit. I do have some units that are looking at their provider agreements, or are looking at their interlocals and talking about, hey, we're going to have this big boost of lit, and we're going to dedicate a portion of it to the territory, but it's going to be partitioned in a capital account. We're not going to pay any personnel off of it because you get used to that personnel, and then there's an unintended benefit of you start stacking it up in a capital account, you stack it up like a fume fund. You help everybody that you either have a shorter term on a debt or you don't borrow as much, and so then you're not passing on interest to folks.
Okay.
And so, again, this is assuming no one else does anything at the same time.
Okay.
So isolation.
Okay. So if the town doesn't use its lit money, to pay its share to the territory, to fund the territory budget, right? Then that's all going to be paid for with property taxes, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And, to a minor amount, see that auto excise in that.
Okay. So,
And if any type of fees that are brought in. We do put a small amount of fees.
okay, but by and large,
Yes.
the lion's share of it's property taxes.
That's correct.
And the lion's share of that's going to be the 2 and 3% properties, those that are non-owner occupied and mostly commercial properties within the annexed territory of Morgantown.
I would tend to agree.
And that's going to be, on those folks, a pretty significant impact on the tax.
As it is in
Right.
here now. Yeah.
So if the town did decide, even for a period of time, even during a transitional phase, to throw some of the lit money at this, and I get that, it certainly makes sense to me that you would commit it to some kind of a reserve account, because I don't think you want to be dependent on it. You don't want to start out being dependent on lit money for daily operations and personnel costs, utility costs, insurance costs, whatever those would be. If we want to say we're going to start building up a reserve fund, and the town's going to contribute to that with lit money, then how does that change the tax rate, or does it, that the property tax rate?
It would.
It won't, right?
Right.
That money is going to be collected from those property owners in property tax by virtue of this territory being formed.
That's correct.
The money's coming.
Right. Well, if we approve it.
Right, but that money's going to be collected, and it's going to come, and it's going to be paid to the territory, not the town,
That's
right? And
well, yeah, there will be a provider unit, and if we decide it is Morgantown.
No,
It is.
Or it's the township. Okay,
Go ahead.
so the money will come to the township in the name of the fire.
Oh, okay. But,
Okay.
so, however, structure, what I'm getting at, I guess, is there's nothing that the town, if the town council decides to use some of this lit money, it can't provide relief for the property taxes being collected from property owners in Morgantown who are affected by this.
I would say it could in a future period, if it had it and it was built up. You wouldn't do it in the first, probably the first year or two. I don't think I'd recommend that. But.
No, here's the thought. We can talk about this offline. We're talking
Yeah.
a lot of inside baseball.
Yeah.
I know, but I think that the council members who are going to vote on this are going to want to have an understanding of what the tax effect on the residents' property owners in Morgantown are gonna be.
And it's stated in here. And
I got it, and what I'm wanting to make sure they hear, because we've got 4 of them here, I think, tonight, is that they're not gonna have any ability to affect that.
Not that, but
Right.
here's the thought.
Okay.
Let's say we're gonna be at the mountain, and then we'll come back down to some reality in a decade. You know, you drove through Trafalgar, we know what's going on all around, you know, northern part of the county is always in play, different than other parts, and Martinsville always wants to have its say, it's what it's like. There's always
Yeah.
activity. So let's say you're gonna get, ballpark, 300 grand total, and you can expect that year over year for a little while. Here's just a very off-the-cuff thought. You sequester 100 of that, and you go, hey, we're gonna work, if the township will agree, do that joint board, and say, let's start beefing up that equipment replacement fund. Because one thing we can do to help each other, and help all citizens, is not going over the tax cap, because there's 2 or 3 things you can do in the state to go over tax cap, and one of them is get a debt levy. Well, let's hold off on debt as long as we can. So, you know, you may not bring tax down, but you may avoid a debt levy. What's the difference? You know, hey, I brought the taxes down, but I spent all my cash, so I got to borrow. I mean, you're just flipping costs.
Right.
You use 100, you know, just as you would need. You would have used your lit for the marshal or police or parks or whatever. And then maybe you look at another portion of it and go, do you have any debt you can defease? Do you have something where you can look at your budget, because the town's different than the township? The township's got township assistance, fire, that fire's gonna go to the territory. Cemeteries, you know, they get sequestered funds, they're partitioned, they don't move around. The town's different, the town has a common pot it has to figure out. So it might bring some of that back and go, I can't mess around with what's needed to do the fire, but maybe I can bring down the town's, $2 or whatever you showed, you know, and kind of,
Right.
like, you're not gonna get all 30 cents.
I get it.
But can you get a nickel of it? Maybe, I don't know.
So in void, you know, buying, if I was looking at it, I'd buy the land from that, and then I'd look at doing, you know, what I could with the building, because anytime we can avoid that second fund, that debt fund, the better off we're gonna be, and the lower the rate's gonna be to the taxpayer overall.
And in this budget, in one of the funds you have proposed here is to build a reserve in order to build a new building.
No, the equipment reserve fund, if you remember what the chief said on his page there, to build the building, he'd either have to get a grant or he'd have to do bonds.
But that would be the third fund that we're not including now.
Correct.
Okay.
And what I said is, you know, I would accumulate money and pay cash for it if I could, because then you wouldn't have to create another tax rate to tax
And
pay.
is there a pressing need and urgent, is that something that's, you have designs on a new building coming soon?
No, it's just a goal.
I get it,
And that's why it's not.
It's a long, really long.
Yeah, that's why it's not
Okay.
a line item.
No, that makes sense. I just wanted to
Because that would
clarify.
be very hard on the taxpayer.
And then I'll get off this. I just want to make sure, I think, and understand, I think probably the council members, I'm thinking of questions that might help them to understand. And I'm wanting to make sure I understand, because they may look to me to talk about this or answer questions. So one other thought too is, I get that if this is put in place, the property tax rate's going to be what it is, and the council's not going to be able to do anything to affect that. And those are the folks that are going to pay the additional cost through property tax rates to fund the budget. We do have a cume cap development fund. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly.
So the town is collecting, what is that, nickel on 100 assessed value from
Correct.
everybody in
The
town.
land is a nickel.
We can eliminate that whenever we choose to.
Absolutely.
If we're going to get additional lit money for a few years that we aren't getting now. Right. Based on your projection, we will, and it's significant.
So you could take the 5 to 2.5, you could take it to zero, and then you would reestablish it if you wanted.
Right, and if the lit then falls off, and once the effect of this is felt and sort of absorbed,
Yeah,
and we kind of get into this and get our legs under us and this starts moving forward, if at some point then the council decided in some number of years down the road, we wanted to reestablish the QCAP Development Fund, we could work back into that nickel over a 3-year period of time and bring it back if we wanted, but in the short term, we could give some relief. 30 cents to a nickel, I realize it's, but it would be a way to give back something in the short term if the council, I'm just trying to think if there's any other way the council can do anything to soften the effect of this, and that's the only thing that comes to mind in the moment.
well, the best one would be CCD, because
Yeah.
you could cut your general fund budget, and you could make it lower and not request as much tax rate for the general fund. That's called bank levy, and you could bank that levy, and that's another option. So if your maximum, and we're really gonna lose the taxpayer, but if your maximum levy is $200,000 in the town, they could go in and say, we only want 180 of that. That 20 is not a permanent loss under today's law today at 7 o'clock. The reason I say that is in the past, that happened, people did that, state legislature came in November and took it all away. So with the CCD, I wouldn't.
No risk of that.
What, pardon?
There's no risk of that. I mean, with the CCD, we could give a little bit of relief, we can always go back to it if we want to.
Yeah, now the CCD, I will tell you, has a little nuance in there that if it goes down to zero, I would be careful, because usually if you start a new CCD from the beginning, it subtracts from your maximum levy. So what I'm saying is, it'd be better to do .0012
Okay.
and not eliminate it totally.
Okay, done, thank you.
And this is a little thing, not compared to that. I don't know what borrowing you've got right now, but as you stack some of this cash, and it's gonna be 2 years before you start getting.
Oh, yeah.
Before you start seeing the increased lit, it's trailed. You might go and say, hey, where are we gonna be in the space of a loan or a bond you have right now? Maybe you achieve some savings with early defeasance.
Yeah.
I've had a couple people.
No, that'd be great, we just really don't, we don't have any general debt obligation.
Yeah.
Yeah, subject to Jeff Thompson, House Ways and Means Chairman, he is working on a way that when the lit bumps up, that a new territory could get it in the same year, but I don't know if that's gonna pass the
Okay.
House.
All right, thanks.
But it's a proposal of it.
Okay.
Because again, kind of the state looks at it is, and Jeff Thompson, Representative Thompson looks at it, is they're looking at consolidation and putting entities together, taking the fixed cost, spreading it over more units, ultimately is better for everybody.
Hard to disagree with.
Yeah. Okay, we really got the weeds on that one. Well, there's more weeds out there. But it's good for you, like you said, for the town board to know.
It is.
Yeah.
And they would, I don't think it's weeds, I think it's questions that will help everybody understand what's being proposed.
Correct, I stand corrected.
And don't feel like, on the way home, sometimes that's when I do my best monitoring and thinking, like, I wish I'd have asked them about the hydrant near.
Come back again.
You drop an email or.
About his concern with the property tax increase, we all are concerned about that. With the lower ISO rating, that's going to be a benefit to the taxpayer, because they're going to recoup some of their money they're paying for insurance, right?
Yeah, we never I don't sell that, because it's not my job to sell this, okay? My job is just state the facts. But I did this in Auburn, Indiana, and they did it, and the council member went and calculated being in the territory versus out of the territory, and it was astronomical. It was $500 or $600 a year. and he showed that as proof. We can't guarantee it. Sometimes there's other factors that go into the ISO. And so my job is not to pull the wool over your eyes. It's just state the
But
facts.
there is a chance that ISO rating lower would offset the cost of
That is
property
correct.
taxes.
Fire territories have generally been recognized as a good thing for that.
I would love for Ball State or IUPUI or Purdue or one of the public universities, because we've done enough territories and districts in the state to go and do some correlation. We all suspect it, and Chief's done the best job of any I've seen. He's actually called some insurance companies and says, if we drop this rate 3 points, what's the net benefit? It's not going to be 1-to-1 on the tax increase, but there is some netting out, and so, yeah.
And to be fair, it's not just the fire department that's involved with the ISO rating, it's the water supply, it's the communication system, there's several different factors involved.
But that's, I like the chief's plan about the pumper, the mini pumper and the other pumper coming, the sooner the better, because, I live out in rural Hendricks County, and that's the key, is getting water if you don't have a hydrant.
Is this the only way to lower the ISO? Because it just went up this year, didn't it, this last year?
It hasn't affected everybody yet anyways.
I mean, that's the only way to lower it back down.
It's definitely a good way to lower it back down. We are doing everything we can right now to try to lower it. And we have to have record keeping, which we're doing, training, things like that. That helps. Again, we weren't the only thing affected in this last ISO rating. The water supply took a huge hit. I mean, they lost half their points in the water. And again, the communication center is actively updating things and stuff, and it gets reassessed when we get reassessed, and things like that scores the ISO rating. So it's not just the fire department.
Right.
Yeah, we took some hits when we lost our part-time, paid staffing a little bit when we had the ambulance and stuff. We took a hit, but we've continued to do everything else that we've always done with pump testing, maintenance, maintenance of vehicles. The list goes on and on of what we are doing right. And a huge part of your ISO rating is staffing. It is a huge part. For the fire part. Again, the water part, I don't have 100% control over. That's working with DPW and areas in Jackson Township and whatever water supply is out there to help our rating. And I do know that the water was a huge hit. And the thing was with ISO, I'm sorry I'm getting on the side so ISO, they graded us, and because of COVID, they kind of delayed, and then they hit us hard. And they do every 5 years they do a audit, and we're reaching that 5-year mark anyways.
Clayton, have you done it, if it went to a fire district, what the county would tax us for a fire district? And we wouldn't have a say in that.
Correct. So, we have focused on territory, and I'm going to briefly just Reader's Digest version. For us, territory we felt like made sense because we're local men and women on this fire department, and we can stay local if we're a territory. If we're a district, we cannot guarantee you that.
And what happens to your equipment?
And we can't guarantee what happens to our equipment.
It goes elsewhere.
Because if the county goes district, we can't control
That's
that.
how we lost.
There are times that ambulance has struggled with maintenance. There's been ambulances down. There have been trouble with getting employees because of people moving on to other pay, other jobs, and our ambulances will get shut down. I don't know if that can happen or not with the district. That's why we, as your local volunteer fire department, are pushing a territory, because if they are going to do a countywide district anyways and raise your taxes anyways, this is an opportunity for us to keep it local, and you see familiar faces that love and care about your community. That's why we are promoting this. And we also that allows our volunteers that have been here over 20 years to still be a part of this. We can't guarantee they would have a job if this was a countywide district. And with us having two entities, the town of Morgantown and Jackson Township, we are eligible to be a territory. So we have put most of our effort into territory over district.
I agree, well, I agree with you.
And that's why we chose this.
And to kind of piggyback that, if you form a district, you're handing the authority and the decision-making to the county seat. Oh, well, Commissioner, that's not working very well. It's like, well, I got to deal with the north end of the county, and everybody's telling me about the west side of the county. I did your district, what you leave me be. And that's it. If you find another partner to join the territory, you can spread some of these fixed costs out, or have just kind of greater purpose or buying power, or you look at it and go, hey, where's all the mutual aid going over there? Where's all the mutual aid going over here? We're already naturally collaborating on providing the service. Then you look at it and go, maybe it's time that we, expand the family. And you can do that, same process. But you go and say, this district's for the birds, it's not working out. Well, too bad.
And it's also safe to say with this plan that the township, as far as the taxation purpose, will be carrying the burden of the collecting, will carry more of a burden than the town when it comes to the tax, the assessed evaluation. I mean, by your numbers.
Right, right. And by the way, you're not the only one looking at doing it in Morgan County. Right?
Well,
So it's going to happen. Might as well jump on board, right?
What's
Taxes are going up a little bit.
There's a high probability that if we don't consider the territory, that we may be asked to join a county-wide fire district.
You're gonna lose local control.
and you're gonna lose your
And you may not
equipment,
see
and
us
they'll put it in
anymore.
other
Your local
towns
faces that
or
you're
other
used to
parts of the
seeing,
county.
because we can't
They
guarantee.
may pull our fire truck, take it north, south,
Yeah,
somewhere.
and we may always have a 5-10-year-old truck here. If we're part of a countywide fire district, we would always have to be in a reserve truck instead of a new truck. So this is why we are the Morgantown Fire Department Incorporated. That's our official title. That's why we are pushing for the territory.
And Jeff and I had several meetings with these guys on the teams and stuff, and we talked about all this. Because we talked about, are you sure you want to go down this path? Why do you want to go down this path? And so, we kind of got into all that before we showed up and started this process.
And for your tax too, if I know some places do quads or north, south, east, west, the budget is what drives the tax. It doesn't matter, if there's a determination to make a district out of these two units, that's fine. But chief has come in and analyzed and says, I need, a low million. I need a little under $1 million. It doesn't matter if it's a district, doesn't matter if it's territory. That's what it takes to put out the level of service to give you the ISO bump, to make sure you've got some personnel. So what legal vehicle you use to put out, what drives this budget, because you got to bring in the revenue to pay for it. But if you want to pick the people who decide the contract and you want to have, say, this is the way you do it. Other people are like, I'm exhausted with fire. I'm done with it. Nobody shows up. The volunteers, I don't want to argue with them. It's different around the state. They may say, take it out of my hands. And sometimes the commissioners do. And maybe it's the right vehicle there. I think you got to try and keep as much at home for as long as you can. That's just me.
I agree.
Any other questions we try to answer?
I just want to say, as clerk treasurer of the town, I have contacted the DLGF. Our representative is Robert Norris.
Oh, okay.
And this was by email. It was just a general question. And I asked if our fire department created a fire territory, would we lose our lift? And he said we would lose our lift. And that is why I'm a little confused. I mean, well, is there a myth out there?
Yeah, you probably, first of all, you talk to your local one. If you want the real answer, call Fred. You know who Fred is?
Yeah, Fred.
Call Fred.
Okay.
Because he'll be the one that says, no, he runs the calculation, the reallocation calculation. He'll say, no, that the reallocation is to hold you harmless as much as possible. So call Fred and tell me what Fred says.
Yeah.
So that's the best.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because if we had loss, we'd show you the loss so you understand it. But Fred reruns his cap.
Well, it didn't seem fair.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't seem fair
Right.
that we would lose it
Yeah.
because we're, I mean, it's,
Call Fred and tell him Greg said to call you.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions out there we try to answer for you?
And if Fred gives you a different answer than I gave you, we will have a Teams meeting with Fred.
Okay.
Okay? So we'll get it straightened out.
Okay, thank you.
So I did want to thank all the town members that came and township members that came on the board and from the community.
Because we need them each time.
We need you all here each time. We do have one more slide for you. Contact info, if you, like he said, if you leave here and you think of a question, if you want to get it out there, you can call here at Morgantown Fire Department, leave us a message. With that question, we will help you get that answered. Again, Jackson Township, our township trustee is Bill Witt, he's here with us tonight. The township office number and the town of Morgantown, we have the town number. Call, give us your questions, we'll get you the answers. And just in closing, the Morgantown Rural Fire Department Incorporated wants to thank you all for being here. Thank you for your support. Again, our goal is to provide you the best service we can and keep it local. Keep it with people you know and trust that love and care about you and your community. And we have several firefighters here tonight because we want to show you that we take a lot of pride in doing what we can to give you the best product out there. We think this is a good solution in the right direction to keep moving forward because financially we need to do something before the county could come in one day and try to take our hand. So these are the options, and anything else in closing?
Yeah, take a cookie.
There's refreshments here. Please get some refreshments on your way out, and we'll bring this meeting to a close. If you leave these numbers up that you can write down before you leave.
Same show, same back time, same back
Yes,
channel.
please come back on February 20th. February 20th, we will be doing it again at 6 p.m. If you write down your questions, want to bring them, press 42.